Okay, so when I was young, a good road trip meant chugging along in my parents' super old motorhome, sipping a cream soda out of a bottle, of course, and singing along with my family at the top of my lungs to the Beatles. And I still remember very vividly being like, help, I need somebody, help. And it was so great. And blasting that song out, and now whenever I hear that song, I'm reminded of that memory, right? Of chugging along, family vacation. It's weird how songs do that, isn't it? They have this way of bringing up the feelings that go along with that memory, and almost like the ability for us to go back in time to that very moment. Well, we're looking at Psalm 126, and it was a song like that. It was a song like that for this people of Israel. It was one of 15 psalms that are known as the Song of Ascent. And these songs were special to Israel. They were supposed to travel 3 times a year, right, to go to Jerusalem and celebrate their festivals. And so that required a great big family road trip. So they would pack up their families and they would travel to Jerusalem. And the city of Jerusalem is up on a hill. It's very hilly, and they were at the bottom, and they would be climbing that long hill of ascent to Jerusalem. They would sing these songs, and they would evoke a lot of memories for these people. So look at your handout with me. We're going to look at verse 1 first. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Have you ever seen with your very own eyes a promise of God's coming to fruition for you or for someone else? Maybe a long prayed for loved one coming to faith, or a prodigal returned, or a miraculous healing, a real life example of someone being restored to God. This is what Israel was remembering. Jeremiah 29:14 said, God said, I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I have driven you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you into. The psalmist wrote of a time when God had set his people free from captivity and being restored to their land and their temple in Jerusalem. Now, not every commentator agrees that this psalm is about our particular group coming back from exile, but it's quite likely that it was. And it doesn't really matter. The people who were coming back were so grateful and so overwhelmed. They were undeserving of the mercy and the grace that God had shown them. It was like they were dreaming. Have you ever been like, pinch me? Is this a dream? It was like that for them. It was too good to be true, but it was true. What an experience to be restored to God like that. To have been brought back to the promised land, deserving exile, but receiving promise. Deserving death, but receiving life. Does that remind you of us, you guys? We're like them in this way. Psalm 126 is for us too. We have been saved like that. If we proclaim Jesus as our King, we were exiles, deserving captivity from our disobedience, and God brought us back to himself and restored our hope and our future too. We are like those who dream, you guys. It's almost too good to be true. Okay, next verse. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. Our salvation should make us very happy, right? We should be exuding with joy. It should be coming from our very bones. There is so much laughter in our mouth that it's just like bursting out of it. I have this vision, this picture in my mind of this verse that like their mouths are just like bubbling, like with bubbles coming out, like bursting with joy. Psalm 51:14 says, "Deliver me from blood guiltiness, O God of my salvation, and my tongue will sing aloud of your righteousness." And Isaiah 35:6 speaks about what being ransomed by God can do, and it says, "Then shall the lame man leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute sing for joy." Jesus says in Luke that if we don't praise, even the rocks will cry out. Are we mute? Shouldn't our mouths be shouting with joy of our salvation? I'm shocked at myself sometimes when I put my head down and I'm quiet. And I say something really lame, like, oh, I was really lucky, or I'm so blessed. Like I'm trying to appeal to what others will think of me. I tried this the other day at work, and because I was writing this lesson, and I just said in conversation, the Lord has done great things for me. And you guys, it really doesn't matter how it was perceived, like I'm not even sure. But really, just say it. Say it. Say it right now. How did that feel? That's good, right? It doesn't feel too weird. Yeah, you just never know when you put that out into a normal conversation where that might go. You never know where it will take you. Our world is actually not as opposed to God as we have been led to believe, I'm telling you. Let's shout the joy of our salvation for a hurting world to hear. You guys, we have so much to shout about. And how will they know if we don't tell them? People will notice your joyful shouting and say the next part of verse 2. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. Do people know that the Lord has done great things for you? The nations could see what God had done for Israel. How will people know what he's done for us? They can watch you, but they'll probably think things like, oh, they'll think you're smart, or you're lucky, or you're privileged, or you're faking. They'll think you work hard, or somehow you earned it. They won't really know unless you tell them the truth. The truth is that the Lord has done great things for us. And we did not deserve it. He has given us unmerited favor. His mercy and his grace have found us. Isaiah 25:9 says, it will be said on that day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for him that he might save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. Let us be glad and rejoice in his salvation. And Zephaniah 3:14 says, sing aloud, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O Israel. Rejoice and exult with all your heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away the judgments against you. He has cleared away your enemies. This is what he's done for us, guys. It's like there was an army of enemies all lined up against us, ready to destroy us. And Jesus came and stood in the way. He saved us from God's holy wrath and his righteous judgment by being righteousness on our behalf, to stand in our place and pay a debt that we could not pay. He restored our fortune and brought us back to himself. Now, if you had an army of enemies, literally standing up against you, and you were saved from that, wouldn't you be telling everybody all the time? It's an amazing story. So Wayne and I have ourselves a little meat shop. We have 3 smokers in this place, and we use them for making sausage and bacon, and sometimes I'll spend some time there. And when I go away from there after spending a day, I get in my car, and I'll be like, oh my goodness, I literally smell like salty pork. I'm always smelling my hair. Yep, still there. And I get home, and my Kenny, if you don't know by now, Kenny's my Labrador, smells me up and down. And he's like, oh, you smell so good. In life, we tend to smell and take on the characteristics of the places that we spend our time. Are you taking on the characteristics of Christ because you're spending so much time with him? Do you shine light into the dark world like he does? Do you smell like him? 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, but we all, with unveiled faces, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord the Spirit. This verse is saying we're basking in his glory, in his presence. We're spending so much time with Jesus and in his word, that when we walk away, like his glory is on us. Like, remember when Moses came down from the mountain, right? And he'd been talking to God. He came down, his face was shining with brightness. There was so much glory on him. The glory actually changed his appearance when he was in God's presence. The more we walk in the Spirit, the more you will shine. Reflect on this and see if you're shining with his glory. Like, it might be time for all of us to smell our hair, right? The Lord has done great things for us, and they have to know that it's not us, it's him. We're going to do a thing right now together. Don't be scared. We're going to do it together. Remember our lantern cards. We introduced those, I think, during the book of Luke. And we all put names in the basket. And those names, they were prayed for throughout that whole season and the next. And then in the summer, the leaders took all of those names home. And we continue to be praying for those names and those people. They matter to us. And we continue to pray for them. So I want you to know now there's a new challenge. We are going to take this lantern card mission to the next level. It's called Lantern 2.0, no cards required. I always have to name things. I don't know what it is about me. It's super weird. Okay. So this week together, we're going to tell someone. We're all going to do it. You can't say no. It's mandatory, as Jen likes to say. I love it when you say it's mandatory. We're all going to tell someone that the Lord has done great things for us. You can use this however you want. You can do it whichever way fits you best. But you could write it on a card, like the lantern cards were. You could write it on your own card. You could write it in a greeting card. You can take a picture of the card and send it to someone. You could text somebody. You could write a card, put it on their doorstep, on their dinner plate, in their purse if it's open. You never know. You could call them or text them, have coffee with them, a walk with them. You could email them or snail mail them. Do you see how many options there are for us? Whichever fits you. So, right now, think of a name. We all have a name. We all have many names, actually. So, who needs to hear that the Lord has done great things for you and can do great things for them? And I want you just to, rip a piece of paper and write the name down. It's just a way for you to commit to the person, and you guys should be doing this right now. You can use, if you don't have paper, you can use the one I gave you. And I'm not going to leave you a lot of time for this, because I know you have a name already. Yeah. So this week, with this name in mind, I want you, and we all will alongside you, you're not alone, we're going to pray and ask God what we should tell them. We're going to be honest, and we're going to be real. We're not going to script something that doesn't suit and isn't true for us, right? You might not choose to tell them the whole gospel all at once. In fact, I don't know if most people are ready for that quite yet. You never know, though. It might start with something as simple as just saying, the Lord has done so many great things for me. God is teaching me right now that, fill in the blank, he's in control of everything and I don't have to worry about blank. You could write something like, I used to be afraid of that and now I'm not because God. Just whatever it is that's real that you think would impact the person on your mind. So when you leave today, this is our basket. We're going to have it by the door. I'm going to drop your name in there. And then all week long, we're all going to pray for everybody's name and what you're doing. Okay? Understood? Thumbs up if it's understood. Okay? Awesome. Good job, guys. Okay, so that's the first half of our psalm. Joy for the Lord and what he has done. But now, there seems to be kind of a shift, right? Because we thought their fortunes were restored, and they were so happy. But now it says, restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the streams of the Negev. It seems the psalmist is saying that although God has done great things for them, he has restored them, provided them, and filled them with joy, there is an acknowledgement that there is still some suffering. The Negev is a lifeless desert, and so they're longing for streams of water there. So there's been this restoration to God, but things are not perfect. There is still work to do. You see, even though they're following God and even though we are following Christ, things aren't going to be hunky-dory all the time, are they? I don't need to tell you guys this. You know this. And actually, the Bible tells us that because we are following Christ, things might even be harder. There's a myth that we all tend to believe sometimes, and it's like, if I am a good Christian, then God won't let bad things happen to me. False. We should expect lots of tears in our life. And we might even want to prepare ourselves to understand that we might even experience more tears than other people. Remember Ezekiel 36:26. God told us he would give us a new heart and put a new spirit within us, removing our hearts of stone and giving us a heart of flesh. When God changes your heart, it gets softer. It gets more vulnerable. You're going to feel more grief over evil, more grief over your sin and the sin of those around you, and more sorrow over those who walk in darkness. You start to have more compassion. As you grow in grace, expect to cry more, to feel more deeply the things that grieve God. The perfect human heart of Jesus was a heart that was full of sorrow, right? He was called a man of sorrow. And we are being transformed more and more into his image, so we can start to smell like him more. We can expect to have more tears along the way. So verse 5 then tells us, those who sow in tears will reap with shouts of joy. Christians should suffer differently, right, guys? Those who sow in tears is different than just crying or being sad. This is an intentional placement of those tears. It's not just an expression of sadness, but a planting of tears. It's purposeful. See, people can overexpress their tears and spiral down into self-pity or despair, or they can completely ignore them and stuff them all down like they're not even there. So neither of those are good. The psalmist here understands that our suffering, our difficulties, the thorns in our sides, or the pains in the life that we need not to waste them. A farmer could just take his bucket of seed and put it in the barn, or he could take his bucket of seed and dump it all in one place. Neither of those will reap any seed or any benefit. The farmer needs to plant those seeds specifically with purpose and see them as an opportunity for growth and fruitfulness. Don't waste your sorrows. When they come, invest them. Christians should suffer differently. And this is an example of light in the darkness, right? It's where the rubber meets the road. And your resolve becomes real. This is the proof in the pudding, as my grandma Uni used to say. Do we live this out, this trusting in hard times, or do we waste our sorrows? People are generally happy and joyful when life is going hunky-dory, right? So people aren't really going to pay much attention to that kind of joy. It's just normal. But when people will notice you, if you are joyful when you're going through the bad stuff, when the culture says you should be down and out, you should be being depressed and quiet and reclusive, not necessarily the hard joy. That's not what they would see, right? That joy that has hope in despair and peace during turmoil. How do you live in tough times? What do you talk about? Do you talk about the thing all the time or spend your time talking about what God is doing in it? How is he showing himself? How is he worthy of your trust during this time? And how is he good no matter what is happening to you? How has he been proving himself faithful? How, if he never did one more thing for you, he's already done too much? How you can't hold on to much right now, but you can hold on to God's promises. People are watching how you respond to life circumstances. Plant your tears with purpose as a testimony of his character. Maybe your Lantern 2.0 will be about how God gives you hope during a difficult time in your life. Maybe you're dealing with a deep loss or hurt or pain. and you're the one sending the encouraging text to the friends around you. Plant those tears for his glory, invest them with a purpose, and don't waste them. So verse 6 now says, "He who goes out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him." Now there's a reference here that I don't want us to miss. It's that he who goes out weeping. Go out. Go out, even if you're sad. Even if the tears are flowing easily. We need to commune with God in prayer and being in his word, but also there's like a going out that needs to take place. This is the risk-taking, gospel-sharing, walking in the Spirit part. Putting yourself out there. Maybe doing the weird thing, like putting a lantern card in a purse. Bearing the seed for sowing implies there's a weight to bear. It's not easy, right? Especially if you yourself are suffering or grieving or sorrowful. People of God are not to sit idly by, waiting for God to come through. God calls us to go out and sow, while praying that in faith, God will keep his promises and do the growing. Notice we're just seed planters, right? Planting seed here and there, that's it. We aren't responsible for the responses. We can't control or turn hearts, but Ezra sure taught us who can, right? And we're told here that when we grieve with a purpose like this, that you won't just have joy, but somehow the joy is what will be reaped. Psalm 30.5, verse 5 tells us that joy will come in the morning. Like joy comes after a time of suffering. But Psalm 126 seems to go a little bit deeper. And it shows us that joy doesn't just come in the morning after the suffering, but in the gospel, if you plant your tears, the tears produce the joy. Joy is what actually is grown by the suffering. It's the product of planting the tears. The suffering, sorrow, grief gets planted intentionally, grieving with a purpose, and it will actually grow the joy. It's like the tear is planted in a pot and it grows the joy. 2 Corinthians 4:17 says, "For the momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory, far beyond all comparison. While we look at the things which are not seen, for the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal." We just need to look to the cross and our ultimate example of suffering in Jesus. His suffering in obedience to God's plan and purpose produced the eternal weight of glory for us. Hebrews 12:1-2 says, "Let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand at the throne of God." So I'm just going to sum this up with a quote from Thomas Horn. He's a theologian from the 1700s, and he wrote about Psalm 126, and he said, "For thus thy blessed Master went forth weeping, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, bearing precious seed, and sowing it around him, till at length his own body was buried like a grain of wheat in the furrow of the grave. But he arose and is now in heaven, from whence he shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, with the voice of the archangel and the trump of God, bringing his sheaves with him." So my sisters, go out weeping, bearing your seed for sowing. You will return, bringing your sheaves with you. Let's pray, and then I have a surprise for us, so don't go anywhere. Don't put your stuff in your bags. God, thank you for your word. Thank you for your word. It's hard. Your word is hard sometimes, but it's so good for us, and we need it. We need to be anchored again and again to the truth. We're so quick to fall away and so quick to get up into our own selves, Lord. So would you receive this morning as an act of worship towards you, and would you help us to remember all the good things we've learned in Ezra, in Jesus' name? Amen.
Okay, so I wrote a little song for Psalm 126, When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouths were filled with laughter, and our tongue with shouts of joy. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us. We are glad. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like streams in the Negev. Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy. He who goes out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like streams in the Negev. Those who show with tears, really loud, shall reap with shouts of joy.